Today's story is from the Mahabharata and it features a talking mongoose that is half gold and that wanders around reviewing royal ceremonies. Welcome to Stories from India. This is a podcast that will take you on a journey through the rich mythology, folklore, and history of the Indian subcontinent. I am Narad Muni, the celestial storyteller and the original Time Lord. With my ability to travel through space and time, I can bring you fascinating stories from the past, the present, and the future. From the epic tales of the Mahabharata and Ramayana to the folk tales of the Panchatantra, to stories of Akbar Birbal and Tenali Raman, I have a story for every occasion. The purpose of the stories is neither to pass judgment nor to indoctrinate. My goal is only to share these stories with people who may not have heard them before, and to make them more entertaining for those who have. In this episode, we are listening to a story from the Mahabharata. It's about a half golden mongoose. This story is from the greatest epic in all of mythology and history, but it is not from the main storyline. And that means you need not have heard any of the previous Mahabharata episodes. Today's story stands alone. Normally, I'd give you a boring introduction about where the scene was set and who was doing what. But let's jump straight in and hear everything we need to from the characters themselves. Red Turban had just arrived at the stadium in Hastinapur, and he was now sitting with his friends, Blue Kurta and Green Shoes. Naturally, I've named the characters based on what they were wearing. Red Turban was apologizing for his delay. Sorry, I just arrived in town, and I came here straight from the bullock cart station. What did I miss? Who's batting first? Blue Kurta shook his head. You missed a lot. You've been gone for 3 whole months. Even just the last 3 weeks have been game-changing. Red Turban was surprised. Don't tell me they've gone and changed the rules again. If they have, it's just not cricket anymore. Green Shoes addressed his friend. And that's where you're wrong, my friend. We aren't about to watch a sports match. This is a Rajasuya Yagna. Now, I could say that Red Turban totally understood what that meant and gasped in shock. But I can see that some exposition is in order. So let's pretend that Red Turban said, Rajasuya Yagna, what is that? And let's further pretend that Green Shoes explained that it was a ceremony to crown their emperor, the emperor of all emperors, the emperor of the universe, in fact. It was customary for anyone to do that once they had eliminated all opposition to the throne. Ah, I knew it, Red Turban exclaimed. The Kaurav princess had what it takes. 5 against 100 didn't look very good for the Pandavas now, did it? People in the neighboring seats stared at Red Turban with shock. A passing moral policeman even cocked an eye at this group. Green Shoes hastily silenced his friend. Shh! Someone might hear us. News flash for you, Red Turban. It's the Pandavas who won. Red Turban was shocked at this revelation. He turned a bright red, but recovered swiftly under the probing eyes of the moral policeman. Oh, did I say Kauravs? I meant Pandavas. I'm a foreigner. We get confused sometimes. Long live the Pandavas. That seemed to satisfy the crowd. However, Red Turban was bursting with questions. Narad Muni's podcast had only covered the Lakshagraha. How did the Pandavas win? How did we get here? Those are questions that we will not answer, saying as we still have some ways to go in the main Mahabharata storyline. Red Turban and yourselves will just have to be a little bit more patient. Besides, the show was starting. It was Bhim who stepped onto the stage. Devio or Sajjano, he said, calling on all the ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the grand, spectacular Rajasuya Yagna. I am your host, your ever-charming MC, Bhim. And I'm here to guide you through this unique dose of tradition. Are you ready for the time of your lives? There were cheers and applause from the crowd. Now, please put your hands together for the man of the hour and my older brother, Emperor Yudhishthir. The crowd broke out into thunderous applause. Bhim proceeded to introduce a slew of rishis who'd be performing the ceremony. They all walked in, one by one, when their names were announced, accompanied by flashing lights, fake fog effects, and their own theme music. The last was curated by the DJ of the evening, Arjun, who was another Pandav brother. Makes complete sense, because Arjun was trained in that, and in heaven no less. There was also an elephant parade, courtesy of the latest circus in town, P.T. Ring Singh's sons and brothers. Bhim continued. Yes, you've heard it right. We've replaced horses and cows with majestic elephants because nothing screams spiritual purification like a herd of elephants decorated with feathered headdresses. Who needs simplicity when we can have extravagant extravaganzas? The ceremony continued pretty well. They even had a seventh shloka stretch, so the audience could stand up and stretch their tired arms and legs. And now, before the grand finale, a word from our sponsors. Are you tired of feeling defenseless in this modern world? Fear not. Introducing Iron Blades, the finest purveyor of swords and spears. Don't miss our limited time offer. Buy one, get the second at half price. Because who doesn't need a trusty sword for their daily commute? Am I right? I mean, not everyone has superhuman strength like me, or is an expert archer like DJ Arjun over there. If the ceremony was great, the finale was even better. They had fireworks too, and it all ended with a bright flash and a majestic looking Yudhishthir on a majestic looking throne. The audience was appropriately wowed. The royal guests were departing now, after collecting their goodie bags full of some handmade jewelry, some locally made achar or pickle, and a souvenir painting, with the Pandavs artificially added into the background. That was awesome, Green Shoes said, as the friends made it down into the arena. They were hoping to get Krishna's autograph. Blue Kurta was staring at his own hand. Arjun shook my hand. I'm not going to wash it for the rest of my life. Red Turban readily agreed. This was the greatest sacrifice he had ever seen. What a ritual! And what an event! He couldn't wait for the next one. Greatest sacrifice, you say? Someone asked. Eek! It's a rat! Red Turban screamed. But it wasn't. It was a mongoose. And the fact that it could talk wasn't the only extraordinary thing about it. Exactly half of its body was golden. The other half was normal mongoose colored, which is to say, a brownish or greyish color. And by half, I mean vertically down the length of its body, not along its waist or something. The mongoose rolled around in the rice and wheat that was scattered on the ground from the ceremony. Then she looked down at her body and said, Just as I suspected, this was a pretty ordinary ceremony. Red Turban took offense at that. Ordinary? You call that ordinary? That was the perfect blend of capitalism and tradition. A little dose of glizz and glamour never hurt anyone. It's the mixture of spirituality and commercialism that brings a lump to every eye and a light to every throat. Blue Kurta asked his friend if he was all right. He had some cough drops, just in case, and a Vicks inhaler. To which Red Turban quickly clarified that he meant a lump in every throat and a light in every eye. But that still didn't seem to convince Blue Kurta very much. The mongoose clarified that she hadn't meant to offend anyone. But wait, just hear her story out. And so she launched into the story of the poor scholar, his wife, his son, and his daughter-in-law. The four of them lived in a little hut. Given that this is ancient India we are talking about, it should not be a surprise that the men, the scholar and his son, divided up the labor by walking around all day, spreading their wisdom and earning a coin, here and there. They did this while the women were toiling away in the kitchen. Their village was hit by a famine. There was no food to be had anywhere. Gradually, they had to cut down from 3 square meals a day to 2, and then 1. And later, it was a lucky day if they got to eat anything. Most of the other villagers had moved out. And when you're in the profession of sprinkling wisdom on your fellow villagers, you're rather dependent on having villagers around who are willing to pay you in exchange for being sprinkled with your wisdom. But I guess the scholar could not take a hint. They all stayed in the village, which soon became a ghost town. Ghost village. It doesn't make sense for a village to turn into a town as it's losing its people, does it? Anyway, after almost a week of going all hungry, the scholar managed to get a handful of wheat from a traveler who had missed all the warning signs of an abandoned village and wandered in by accident. A handful of wheat isn't much, but to the hungry scholar and his family, it looked like a feast. They did all they could to not eat the wheat raw. The scholar's wife made one roti with the wheat, and just as she cut the roti into 4 pieces and served it to everyone, the doorbell rang. The scholar was surprised by the interruption and really hoped that it wasn't the traveler back here looking to get his wheat back. But he needn't have worried. It was just another traveler. But there was something about the stranger, a young and handsome man. He didn't even greet them properly. He just stumbled in and said that he was very hungry. Did they have any food? Now, I know how most of us might react. But the scholar wasn't just preaching a bunch of rules. He was actively living by them. His sermon just yesterday was Atithi Devo Bhava, which means any guest was to be treated like a god or goddess. So the scholar welcomed the traveler in and offered his own quarter roti. The traveler wolfed it down and asked if there were seconds. It was the son who gave up his share next. But then the traveler asked for thirds and fourths, which he also got from the scholar's wife and daughter-in-law. After the traveler had finished the roti and looked at their sad eyes, he laughed and then explained that he was Indra. He was a god, the chief of the Devs, and he was just testing them. Now, if they were all ready, he was here to take them to Swarg or heaven. And no, that wasn't Yam's job. Yam was the god of death. Indra clarified that this family weren't dying or anything. They were just being promoted. It wasn't like the little matchstick girl type of story. That's just too dark. The mongoose said that she had watched all this from the window. When they all departed, she wandered into the scholar's hut. She'd been looking for something to scratch an itch she had on her back. Seeing a little bit of the wheat that had spilled on the floor, she thought she'd roll in it. It couldn't make things worse, could it? And so the mongoose did that. And it didn't make things worse. It made half her body golden. There was no more wheat left. Since then, the mongoose had been wandering the earth, looking for places where great sacrifices had been performed. She had also experimented with many different grains, but the result was always the same. Her body did not turn fully golden, which completely meant that the sacrifice wasn't as great as that of the poor family. Here in Hastinapur, as she rolled on the floor, her body did not turn fully golden, which completely meant that the sacrifice wasn't as great as that of the poor family. That's all she had to say, and she was off now. And no, she didn't have the time to explain how she could talk in a human language. Just roll with it, won't you? She said as she disappeared from view. So there you have it. All that money spent and all the rich and famous people involved in the event. Despite all that, the Hastinapur event planners only got a 1-star review. And that too from a mongoose. That's it for this time. Check out the links in the show notes and on the site sfipodcast.com for other Mahabharata episodes. In the next episode, we are doing a folk tale from Assam. It's about a girl and her evil stepmother, with lots of magical transformations thrown in, including a completely redefined life cycle of plants. Thank you all for the comments on social media and on Spotify's Q&A. I can't directly reply to the questions there, but I'll address them here on the show. Thank you, Vamsi and Samay. It's feedback like yours that encourages me to continue doing this podcast. Yes, I will be switching back to the Ramayana very soon. If you have any other comments or suggestions, or if there are particular stories that you'd like to hear, please do let me know by leaving a comment or a review on the site sfipodcast.com, or tweet at sfipodcast, or reply to the questions on Spotify's Q&A. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get notified automatically of new episodes. A big thank you to each and every one of you for your continued support and your feedback. The music is from purpleplanet.com. That's purple-planet.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.